This is Troy Small with Skyway Acquisition, and today's video is on the uniform contract format. Now, I'm going to read this statement on verbatim out of the FAR on what exactly the uniform contract format is. That way we all have the real understanding based on the FAR. The use of a uniform contract format facilitates preparation of the solicitation and contract, as well as reference to and use of those documents by offers, contractors, and contract administrators. So basically it's a guide, a template that is being used. The UCF is prescribed in FAR Part 15.204 TAC 1. So meaning that FAR Part 15 is what prescribes the uniform contract format, and FAR Part 15 is contracting by negotiation. So what that means is that if a procurement is issued under the authority of FAR Part 15, then the uniform contract format must be used unless, of course, it meets one of the exceptions. One point that I do want to make is that procurements conducted under FAR Part 13, which is simplified acquisition procedures, they may use the uniform contract format out of FAR Part 15, right? They may use that. They may use portions of it as well if they want, which is most likely how it happens. However, they're not required or mandated to use the entire format. FAR Part 13 is not required to use the entire UCF format, if you will. Basically, only procurements under FAR Part 15. Now, there are some exceptions to this. For instance, if you're doing construction and architecture and engineering type contracts, you do not have to use the UCF. Subsistence contracts do not have to use the UCF. Supplies and services that require like special contract language, like, they have a special flavor to them, those are not required to use the UCF. And then also letter requests for proposal, like letter contracts, and then, basically contracts that have been exempted by the agency or the agency head, right? They've done a determination to say that, hey, it's best that we use something other than the UCF for this particular procurement, for reasons that they justify in their documents. And so those are the exemptions, if you will. Now, what exactly, excuse me, is the UCF? Well, the UCF is composed into 4 parts. So there's 4 distinct parts in the uniform contract format, and each of those parts contains 1 or more sections. And so we're going to go ahead and go through each part, and then I'll highlight the sections that are contained in each part and basically give you some ideas or examples of the type of information that's contained within. Now, I do have a little note list here so that I can keep myself on track, and also to make sure that I'm, hitting the information that needs to be hit, and that is, a succinct video, if you will. But I don't want to really miss anything, so I may be looking down from time to time, but that's only to make sure that I'm saying it properly as it's listed in the FAR, and then I'll give some personal insight on what I typically see in those sections. Now, the first part is, part 1 is the schedule. Now, the schedule contains sections A through H of the solicitation and or contract. Now, so section A, that's the very first part of the solicitation that you're going to see, and the contract for that matter. The information contained in section A is the key and pertinent information to the procurement. So you're going to find the name, phone number, address of the actual agency or the unit that's doing the procurement. You will find information about the procurement, the solicitation number, solicitation due date, whether it's set aside for small business or not. If it's not, then that would mean it's an unrestricted procurement. If there's a DPAS rating, FOB, destination or origin, and so all of these things, who the contracting officer is. So these are the things that you're going to find in section A. So that's where the bulk of that information is going to be. Now, I want to caution you and make sure that you're aware. Just make sure you're looking at that, because sometimes as contracting officers, what we do is we'll say see schedule, right? And so see schedule means you have to go and look somewhere else in the actual contract to figure out where that information, typically that would be in that little box. Maybe they have too much information that to go in that box. So they put the information somewhere else in the schedule. Well, it was, coming upon you to then go to that section, find that information, and then, abide by it accordingly. Section B. So what section B is typically, this is what, not typically, well, this is where you will find the cleanse, the contract line item numbers, for instance, like 0001 or 0002. But this is where the cleanse and the supplies or services and the prices and costs of those supplies or services are going to be listed. So you're going to have like your unit price of an item. So let's say that you're buying, let's say you're buying furniture, right? We're buying conference room furniture and chairs. So for the chairs, you're going to have a unit price, $250, $300 per chair times, 100 chairs, and then you have your total price. And then at some point at the very end of that, you'll have a tally of all of those cleanse and the total price of everything in one big bulk for what it is. So that's where you're going to find that information there. Now, once again, pay attention, because as an example, if it's a service, it may not have any cost information in that part, and it may. So you just have to pay attention. They may have it somewhere else in the schedule. But the point that I want to make here is that section C, the name of section C is description, specification, statement of work. This is typically where you're going to find your statement of work, your performance work statement, your statement of objectives, whatever type of procurement it is. This is where you're going to find that information right there. Or you may find an extended version of just cleanse in section C as well. But that's where you're going to get some detailed or more detailed information on exactly what the government is buying and what exactly it is that they're looking for in your response as an offerer. So this section C, B, and the whole thing is important, but B and C are really going to highlight what exactly it is that the government is going to want from you and want you to provide back to them. So the next section is section D. Section D is packaging and marking. And so in this section, this is typically where you're going to find if there's any special preservation, packaging preservation and things like that. If they want you to mark the items a certain way when you deliver it, maybe they want the contract number on the outside of the packaging. Maybe there needs to be some type of special palleting or crating. So this is what you're going to find in section D, is that type of information. Now, section E, this is inspection and acceptance. Excuse me. You're going to find inspection and acceptance information, quality assurance, reliability requirements, things like that. So for instance, let's say that you're doing a contract that requires like full rate production or even LRIP, even low rate initial production, meaning that you're going to be producing the same item multiple times over an extended period for a contract period. Well, there may be a requirement for first article testing or something to that extent, right? And they may say, the government may say, we want a first article, and we want to do the inspection and acceptance of the first article at the contract's facility. In other words, they don't want you to deliver it and they do inspection and acceptance at the government facility. In this section, they would indicate that they want to do the exception and inspection of the first article at the contract's facility. So in other words, they may do an inspection and acceptance there, and then they may say, okay, go ahead and ship to our location. Once it gets to the location, you just have to verify that nothing got damaged in shipment. But for the most part, the government has already accepted the fact that the item that they're buying, quote unquote, works in accordance with the contract because they accepted it at the origin at the contractor's facility. So the next section is section F. And keep in mind, all of this is still in part one. So part one has a good bulk of the information on a particular solicitation, or in this case, for the uniform contract format. Section F speaks to deliveries and performance. So if there's any special delivery or performance requirements. So in my time, I've worked on, I can't tell you how many contracts where you have multiple delivery locations for different items. And the reason why is because there's more than one end user used on this contract. You may have 3 to 5 different other end users, and they all may tap into this IDIQ, which is an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract. And because they're different units, of course, they have different delivery addresses. And so that information would go into Section F. Section G is contract administration data. So a lot of information sometimes, many times what you're going to find here is like appropriation and accounting data. Maybe there's some special, acronyms that they want to highlight because there's a lot of different acronyms and all that. That's funding. I don't really want to go much into detail in this video, but it's just the type of monies and things like that, money and funding codes that the government uses to pay for the procurements that they do. Also in Section G, many times you'll also find information about government furnished material, government furnished property, and things like that. And so like the administration of that government furnished property, that information may be placed there. It also could be placed in the next section as well, which is Section H, which is special contract requirements. So basically Section H is kind of like a catch-all where the government contracting officer can put pretty much any other type of terms and condition type of information, requirements that they would like the offerer to do, perform, provide back. They can place that information in Section H if it doesn't fit necessarily in any of the other sections. All right, so that's that's part one right there of the uniform contract format. Part two is contract clauses. So this one is not as lengthy as the previous section or the previous part, if you will. Part two, contract clauses, only has one section, and that's Section I, and it's contract clauses. And so this is where you're going to find the start of all of the clauses that are applicable to the requirement, to the procurement. So, your clauses for just commercial clauses, clauses on payment, wider workflow, just all of these different things. You're going to find that there in Section I. Excuse me. Now, Part 3. All right. So now we just did Part 1 and Part 2. Part 3 is list of documents, exhibits, and attachments. That's the name of Part 3. Part 3 has one section, and it's Section J. And Section J is list of attachments. Now, Section J, so the types of attachments, so basically the contracting officer is going to tell you, attachment 1 is this. It may have, how many pages, it may have a date on it, what it is, just any details on attachment will be listed in this section. It's very important that you as a bidder, as a quoter, as an offerer, all of these things kind of mean the same thing. We use them synonymously, but it's very important that if you're going to be submitting back on these requirements, that you pay attention to Section J. The reason why is because Section J may have some additional requirements for you to perform. For example, if there are procedural requirements, the procedurals may be listed in Section J. Procedures are contract data requirements list, meaning that these are requirements that are listed out that you have to do and provide back. It's data you have to send back. So if you're missing, this piece, that's a big part of the contract. And of course, you would be non-responsive in your response if you didn't address any of those particular attachments. So I just throw that out there. And so now getting to Part 4. Part 4 is representations and instructions. Part 4 contains sections K through M. Okay. Section K is representations, certifications, and other statements of offers or respondents. Basically, this is what we call your reps and certs, or your certs and reps, however you want to say it. It's the same thing. This is the information about your company that is contained in SAM. So when you do your SAM registration, this is the data that is basically spits out when they talk about certs and reps. So basically, you want to make sure that your certs and reps are up to date, particularly if you're bidding on a requirement. You want to make sure that number one, especially, is that you have the next code of the requirement that you're bidding on. Make sure that it's in your SAM profile, right? It needs to be in there, or otherwise you would not be eligible for award. All right. The next thing is, of course, is to make sure that you update your SAM profile. And keep in mind that anytime you go into SAM to update your profile, it forces you to complete the entire process, which then once you complete that, then you are your SAM profile has been updated as of that date, and you were good basically for another year. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, Section L. Now, I'll be honest. So the next video that I was considering to do was Section L. And as I was, pondering, how was my approach, I was like, well, wait a minute. I can't do a video on Section L if the audience does not necessarily understand what Section L is and where it comes from, which is why we're doing the video today on the uniform contract format, because this is where Section L is housed in the UCF. Now, Section L is instructions to offer, I'm sorry, see, I always call it instructions to offers, but let's get the formal name, all right, for all, everyone who wants the formality here in a sense. Instructions, conditions, and notices to offers or respondents, right? That's the name of Section L, and that's going to be the next video, by the way. So make sure you pay, look out for the next video because it's going to be on Section L. Now, Section L basically specifies further organizational response of the proposal and how they want the proposal back, whether it be the number of pages, like if there's a page limit, the font, the size of the font, borders, graphs, things like that, but also your administrative information, technical, key personnel, past performance, and all of these things. So this is where you're going to find that information in Section L. Section C, the statement of work, and Section L and Section M, which we're about to discuss here in a sec. Those are very important sections of that, of an RFP in the sense of, but particularly of the UCF, because those really contain the meat of what the government is asking for. And it also gives you a mapping of how you should organize your response. So with that said, Section M is evaluation factors of the award. So Section M is evaluation factors of award. So what they're telling you here is that this is where the government is explaining to you how they're going to evaluate your response and your proposal. They're saying that these are, we're going to look at technical, and in your technical, I'm going to look at your technical approach. I'm going to look at the sample problem. I'm going to look at key personnel. And then I'm going to look at past performance, and I'm going to look at, small business participation or something like that. So that information will be contained in Section L, and in Section M, they will explain how they're going to grade those things that I just named off. So that's the uniform contract format from sections A through M. So we discussed the UCF, we discussed the parts of the UCF, and we also discussed each of the sections in a small detail. So I hope this video helps. I hope that it came across well so that you guys can understand it. And I hope that you're able to put it to use for your success. So until the next video, take care. I'll see you guys soon. I'm out.